Jung discovered that terrified him. Certain individuals who cannot, and I mean literally, cannot be emotionally manipulated by anyone. Not because they're psychopaths, but because they've seen through something so fundamental about human nature that once you understand it, you can never go back to being a normal, reactive person again. And what terrified Jung most wasn't what these people could do. It was what they could no longer feel. I'm not talking about numbness. I'm not talking about dissociation or emotional death. I'm talking about something far more disturbing. The complete inability to be offended. The absolute impossibility of taking things personally. The total absence of emotional triggers that define what we call being human. Have you ever met someone who simply cannot be provoked? I mean, truly cannot. You could betray them publicly, humiliate them, attack everything they stand for, and they look at you with this peculiar expression, not of superiority, not of judgment, but of genuine fascination, as if you've just revealed something profound about yourself that has absolutely nothing to do with them. Jung called this the most dangerous state of consciousness a person could achieve. Dangerous not to themselves, but to the entire social order that depends on our predictable emotional reactions. Because when someone can't be emotionally manipulated, they can't be controlled. And a person who can't be controlled is a threat to every system built on emotional leverage. Let me tell you about Heinrich, a businessman Jung studied for years. This man had been brutally betrayed by his closest partner, lost half his fortune overnight, his reputation destroyed, his family name dragged through the mud. When Jung asked him about his feelings toward this betrayer, Heinrich said something that haunted Jung for the rest of his life. Why would I be angry at my own reflection? You see, Heinrich had discovered what would later shake the foundations of Jung's understanding of human psychology. Every person who triggers us, who makes our blood boil, who gets under our skin, they're not actually affecting us at all. They're showing us something we've hidden from ourselves. Something we've buried so deep that we can only see it when someone else displays it. And here's the part that will disturb you. The person who infuriates you most, the one whose very existence seems designed to torment you, they're you. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. They're performing the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, suppressed. Think about this for a moment. Really think about it. That person you despise, what exactly about them makes your skin crawl? Their arrogance, their weakness, their fakeness? Now here's the knife that Heinrich understood. That trait doesn't just live in you, it is you. The part of you that you've exiled so completely that you can only recognize it when it appears outside yourself. And once you see this, truly see it, not just intellectually, but in your bones, something breaks. The ability to be angry at others simply stops working, like trying to be furious at a mirror for showing you your own face. I knew a woman, let's call her Maria, a brilliant teacher who spent 3 years being psychologically tortured by a colleague. This colleague would undermine her in meetings, spread rumors about her competence, steal her ideas and present them as her own. Maria would go home shaking with rage. She'd lie awake plotting revenge, imagining confrontations, feeling her heart race every time she saw this woman's car in the parking lot. Then something happened that changed everything. Maria was venting to her therapist, describing in detail all the ways this colleague was a manipulative, insecure fraud who built herself up by tearing others down. And in the middle of her rant, she stopped. Her face went white. Because she heard it, she heard herself describing herself. Not the surface self she presented to the world, but the shadow self she'd buried. Every accusation she hurled at this colleague was a confession about her own hidden nature. The colleague who stole ideas, Maria realized she'd built her entire teaching philosophy on concepts she'd taken from others without attribution. The colleague who was insecure, Maria was terrified every day that someone would discover she was a fraud. The colleague who undermined others, Maria had subtle ways of diminishing anyone who threatened her position. And here's what nobody tells you about this recognition. It doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels like dying. Because in that moment, Maria understood that she hadn't been fighting her colleague for 3 years. She'd been fighting herself. And every attack, every sleepless night, every stress symptom, she'd been doing it to herself. The colleague was just a projection screen for her own self-hatred. But then, and this is the crucial part, something else emerged from this death. Once Maria saw the projection, once she recognized the mirror, she discovered something that most people never achieve: the gap. Let me explain what I mean by the gap, because this is where Jung's terror really began. Most of us live our entire lives in what Jung called reaction slavery. Someone says something, we react. Someone does something, we respond. It's instant, automatic, as mechanical as a knee-jerking when tapped. We think we're choosing our responses, but we're not. We're running programs installed in us before we could even speak. But when you see through the projection, when you recognize that your triggers are just your own shadows being performed by others, something extraordinary happens. Time slows down. A space opens up between what happens to you and what you do about it. And in that space, that fraction of a second that feels like eternity, you find something most people never experience. Freedom. Real freedom. Not the freedom to control your anger, but the freedom to not generate it in the first place. Heinrich described it like this: when someone would try to provoke him, he could see their words floating toward him in slow motion. He could watch them arrive, observe them hanging in the air, examine them like a scientist studying specimens. And in that examination, he could see exactly what the attacker was revealing about themselves: their pain, their fear, their desperation. The attack would arrive, but it wouldn't land, because there was nowhere for it to land. The part of Heinrich that could be offended had died when he saw through the illusion of separation between himself and others. This is what most people don't understand about emotional immunity. It's not about being strong enough to handle your emotions. It's about reaching a state where certain emotions simply can't form. Like trying to make waves in solid ice. The mechanism that creates the disturbance no longer functions. But here's where it gets dark. Really dark. When you achieve this immunity, when you can no longer be triggered, you start to see something that will haunt you forever. You see that everyone around you is fighting ghosts. Everyone is shadow boxing with their own projections. Everyone is exhausting themselves in battles against enemies that exist only in their own minds. You watch your friends destroy their marriages fighting traits in their partners that actually live in themselves. You watch your family members make themselves sick with anger at situations they themselves created. You watch entire groups of people torture each other, each person attacking in others what they most fear in themselves. And you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the comfortable unconsciousness where you believed the drama was real, where you could participate in the mutual emotional violence and feel justified. Heinrich told Jung that this was the worst part. I live among sleepwalkers, he said. They're all dreaming they're in a war, dreaming they have enemies, dreaming they're victims, and I'm awake, watching them fight air, watching them exhaust themselves against illusions, watching them create the very suffering they claim to hate. The loneliness of this position is unbearable, because when you can no longer be triggered, when you can see that all attacks are just projections, when you understand that everyone's emotional reactions are just shadow material being activated, you lose something precious. You lose the ability to blame, and losing blame is like losing gravity. Suddenly, you're floating in a space where you're completely responsible for your own experience. No one can make you feel anything. No one can hurt you emotionally. No one can disturb your peace. Which means if you're disturbed, if you're hurt, if you're not at peace, it's your creation. This is why Jung was terrified. Not because these people were dangerous to others, but because they represented the end of psychology as he understood it. If people could reach a state where they literally couldn't be triggered, where emotional manipulation was impossible, where projection was seen through completely, then everything we understand about human behavior collapses. I want to tell you about David, because his story shows just how deep this rabbit hole goes. David worked in the most toxic environment you can imagine. His boss was a sadist who enjoyed humiliating employees publicly. His colleagues were backstabbers who would sabotage each other for the smallest advantage. The culture was pure psychological warfare, gaslighting, manipulation, emotional terrorism as standard practice. For years, David was dying. Panic attacks, insomnia, his hair falling out from stress. He was on 3 different medications just to get through the day. His therapist told him to quit, but he couldn't afford to. He was trapped in hell. Then one morning, something snapped. Or perhaps Something finally clicked. David walked into the office and saw it all differently. Not metaphorically, literally, saw it differently. Like someone had switched the channel from a horror movie to a nature documentary. His sadistic boss wasn't a monster. He was a traumatized child in a suit, reenacting his own childhood abuse on others. The backstabbing colleagues weren't evil. They were terrified animals, fighting for survival in a system that told them there wasn't enough to go around. The toxic culture wasn't a battlefield. It was a mental hospital where the patients were running the asylum. But here's the disturbing part. David didn't feel compassion. He didn't feel sympathy. He felt nothing. Complete emotional neutrality. Like watching ants in an ant farm. Interesting, but not personally affecting. His boss would scream at him, and David would observe the vein throbbing in his forehead, notice the tremor in his hands, catalog the specific words that revealed his deepest insecurities. His colleagues would try to sabotage him, and David would watch them like a scientist watching mice in a maze, noting their patterns, their triggers, their entirely predictable responses. Within 6 months, David was running the department. Not because he fought back or played the game better, but because he had stepped out of the game entirely. While everyone else exhausted themselves in emotional combat, David just did excellent work. While others formed alliances and betrayals, David simply produced results. His former boss ended up reporting to him. And in their first meeting, this former tormentor broke down crying, begging David to tell him his secret. "How did you survive me?" he asked. "How did you not let me destroy you?" David's answer reveals the final piece of this puzzle. You weren't trying to destroy me. You were trying to destroy something in yourself that you saw in me. Once I understood that, there was nothing to survive. You were fighting your own reflection. I just happened to be the mirror. But here's what David didn't tell his former boss. Here's what he couldn't tell anyone who hadn't crossed this threshold. Once you see through the illusion, once you understand that all emotional violence is self-violence projected outward, you become something that isn't quite human anymore. At least not human as we normally define it. You become what Jung privately called the awakened dead. Alive, functioning, maybe even thriving, but dead to the emotional drama that defines human society. Unable to participate in the mutual triggering that passes for relationships. Incapable of the emotional fusion that most people call love. This is the price. And it's a price most people aren't willing to pay. Maria described it perfectly. After her immunity developed, her relationships started dying. Not because she was cold or cruel, but because she could no longer play the game. Friends would come to her with their dramas, expecting her to take sides, to validate their victimhood, to participate in their emotional reactions. But Maria couldn't. She would see through their stories to the projections underneath. She would recognize their complaints as confessions. She would understand their enemies as their own shadows. She'd try to help them see it too, but they didn't want to see. They wanted to stay in the dream where they were victims, where their suffering was someone else's fault, where their emotional reactions were justified by external circumstances. One by one, they left. They called her cold, unfeeling, inhuman. They said she'd changed, that she wasn't the same person anymore. And they were right. The Maria who could be triggered, who could take things personally, who could believe in the reality of emotional attacks that Maria was dead. What remained was something else. Something that could witness human suffering without being pulled into it. Something that could see clearly without needing to fix or save or change anything. Something that could love without attachment, care without codependence, be present without fusion. But here's the paradox that Jung struggled with until his death. These awakened dead, these emotionally immune individuals, they weren't actually cold or disconnected. They had accessed something beyond normal human emotion, something Jung called conscious compassion. Think about what this means. Most of us are either emotionally fused, we feel others' emotions as our own, we get triggered by their triggers, we suffer when they suffer, or we're emotionally cut off, we build walls, we disconnect. We protect ourselves through distance. But there's a third option that emerges from true immunity. The ability to remain completely open, completely present, completely feeling, without being destabilized, without being pulled into the other person's emotional weather, without losing your center. Heinrich demonstrated this when his betrayer came to him years later, dying and alone. This man had stolen Heinrich's money, destroyed his reputation, turned his friends against him. He came expecting anger or maybe forgiveness. What he got was neither. Heinrich sat with him for hours, listened to his story, held space for his regret and fear, not from a place of superiority or spiritual bypassing, but from a place of recognition. This man's betrayal had been Heinrich's liberation. It had forced him to see his own shadows around money, reputation, and approval. It had been the catalyst for his awakening. The dying man asked Heinrich, "How can you not hate me?" Heinrich's response cuts to the core of this immunity. "How can I hate my teacher? You showed me where I was still asleep. Your betrayal revealed my attachments. Your attack showed me what I was still defending. Without you, I would have remained unconscious. You freed me from myself." This isn't forgiveness in any conventional sense. It's something more radical. It's the recognition that there was never anything to forgive because there was never really an attack. There was only unconsciousness meeting unconsciousness until one party woke up and stepped out of the dance. But I need to be brutally honest with you about something. This immunity isn't achieved through positive thinking or meditation or any technique you can learn from a book. It's achieved through dying while alive, through watching everything you thought you would dissolve, through seeing every story you've told yourself about who you are and why you suffer revealed as fiction. Maria said there were nights when she couldn't breathe from the vertigo of seeing how much of her life had been reaction to illusion, how many years she'd wasted fighting projections, how much energy she'd spent defending against attacks that were really just her own self-hatred reflected back at her. The process isn't just psychologically difficult. It's existentially devastating, because you're not just changing your responses. You're discovering that the entire framework within which you've understood yourself and others is false. The you that can be triggered isn't the real you. It's a collection of programs and patterns and projections. And when that false self dies, what remains is something that has no reference points in normal human experience. This is what Jung meant when he said these people terrified him. They proved that human consciousness could evolve beyond the emotional patterns that psychology assumes are fixed. They demonstrated that triggering was optional, that taking things personally was a choice, that emotional suffering was self-created and self-maintained. But here's the final twist that even Jung didn't fully grasp until near the end of his life. These immune individuals, these awakened dead, they become something else. They become what ancient traditions called the wounded healers, or what we might call the conscious warriors. They can walk into any situation, no matter how toxic, and remain unaffected, not because they're protected by walls, but because they have no surfaces for toxicity to stick to. They can witness the deepest human dysfunction without judgment because they recognize it all as variations of their own shadow material. They can hold space for others' emotional storms without being swept away because they've found their own unshakable center. And paradoxically, this makes them incredibly dangerous to unconscious systems. When David became immune, his entire company started to transform. Not because he tried to change it, but because his presence revealed the insanity of the dysfunction. His non-reaction to attacks made the attackers look ridiculous. His calm in chaos made the chaos unnecessary. His refusal to participate in drama made the drama impossible to maintain. Within 2 years, the most toxic workplace in the industry became known for its exceptional culture, not through any program or initiative, but through the presence of one person who couldn't be triggered. One person who saw through the projections. One person who had died to the false self and couldn't participate in the collective unconsciousness. The other employees didn't know what had changed. They just knew that the old games didn't work anymore. The emotional manipulation fell flat. The drama couldn't sustain itself. Slowly, without understanding why, they began to wake up too. This is the ultimate irony of emotional immunity. The people who can't be bothered by anyone become the ones who transform everyone, not through effort or intention, but through their mere presence. They become mirrors in which others see their own reactivity. Their non-triggering highlights others' constant triggering. Their peace reveals others' war. Some people will hate them for this, will call them cold, inhuman, dangerous, because their immunity threatens the very foundations of how most people understand relationships, society, and themselves. But others, the ones who are ready, the ones who are exhausted from fighting their own projections, will be drawn to them like moths to flame. They'll sense something different, something that promises freedom from the endless emotional warfare that most people call life. So here we are at the heart of it. The possibility that you could become someone who literally cannot be emotionally manipulated. Not through force or control or spiritual bypassing, but through such a complete understanding of projection and shadow that triggering becomes impossible. The question isn't whether this state is achievable. Heinrich proved it is. Maria proved it is. David proved it is. The question is whether you're willing to die for it. To let the reactive you, the triggered you, the you that believes in enemies and attacks and emotional causation, to let that you die completely. Because make no mistake, this is a death. Everything you think you are, every story you tell about yourself, every belief about why you suffer and who's to blame, it all has to go. And from that death, something else emerges. Something that Jung could barely find words for. Something that operates under different laws of psychology altogether. The invitation is terrifying. The path is devastating. The price is everything you think you are. But on the other side is something extraordinary. The ability to walk through the world untouchable. Not because you're defended, but because there's nothing left to defend. Not because you're strong, but because the you that could be weak is dissolved. A freedom so complete that you finally understand what the mystics meant when they said, you are in the world but not of it. The choice, as always, is yours. But now you know what's possible, and you can never unknow it. That's the real danger. What if this moment right now, as you're listening to my voice, isn't what you think it is? What if the solid, dependable reality you're so certain of is actually far more mysterious, far more fluid than you've been led to believe? I want to invite you on a journey not to some distant place, but right into the heart of your own experience. Because the question isn't whether you might be dreaming someday or sometime. The real question, the question that might just change everything about how you see your life, is whether you might be dreaming right now. You see, we've all been taught this marvelous fiction that there exists a clear, unmistakable boundary between dreaming and waking. That one state is real and the other merely illusion. But I want to suggest something rather revolutionary, that this boundary is not nearly as solid as we pretend it is. Consider how, while dreaming, you rarely question the reality of your experience. The dream tiger chasing you feels absolutely real. The dream lover's touch feels absolutely real. It's only upon waking that we say, that was just a dream. But what's fascinating is that during the dream itself, you were utterly convinced of its reality. Now, isn't it curious that we're equally convinced of the reality of this present moment? What makes you so certain you aren't dreaming now? Well, you might say, everything follows logical rules here. Things are consistent. I can touch this surface and feel it. But couldn't a sufficiently vivid dream provide all those sensations too? The ancient Chinese philosopher, Chuang Tzu, once dreamt he was a butterfly fluttering about, happy and content. When he awoke, he wondered, am I a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, or am I a butterfly now dreaming I am a man? This isn't mere wordplay, you see. It points to something extraordinary about consciousness itself. What we call reality and what we call dream might be far more similar than different both are experiences arising in consciousness. Both feel absolutely real when we're in them. The only difference is that one state seems to last longer and have more consistent rules. But is duration and consistency really the definition of what's real? I rather think not. Now, how do you really know that you're awake right now? What's your evidence? Perhaps you're thinking, well, I can read these words clearly, and reading is difficult in dreams. Or maybe, I remember how I got here, and my memories are coherent. But aren't these just tests we've invented to reassure ourselves? You see, we create these little reality tests, these checks and balances, to convince ourselves we're firmly planted in the real world. We pinch ourselves. We look for inconsistencies. We trust in the solidity of objects. But here's the fascinating thing. What if the dream itself provides all the confirmation you seek? In a particularly vivid dream, you can indeed read words. You can remember a perfectly logical sequence of events that led you to the present moment in the dream. You can touch objects that feel absolutely solid. The dream, you see, can manufacture all the evidence you require to believe in its reality. What's more, the dream can even incorporate your doubts. You might ask yourself within a dream, is this a dream? And then perform some test that convinces you that no, you're definitely awake. How marvelously recursive. The dream creates both the doubt and the resolution of that doubt. So I put it to you, what if this present moment, this seemingly solid reality, is equally capable of manufacturing all the evidence you need to believe in its absolute reality? What if the very confidence you feel about being awake is itself part of the dream? This isn't meant to frighten you or to suggest some kind of cosmic conspiracy. Rather, it's an invitation to hold more lightly this thing we call reality, to see it not as a fixed, immutable truth, but as a kind of magnificent play, a dance of consciousness that we're participating in. And perhaps in that lightness, in that willingness to question, lies a kind of freedom we hadn't imagined possible. Let's go deeper now. Who exactly is the dreamer when you dream? You might say, well, I am, of course. But which I is that? Is it the same I that's listening to me right now? When you dream, you create entire worlds, populated with characters that can surprise you, landscapes you've never seen, conversations you didn't consciously compose. All of this emerges from what we might call your deeper mind, a creative intelligence that seems to operate below the threshold of your everyday awareness. And yet, this is the extraordinary thing, you experience these dreams as if they're happening to you rather than being created by you. The dreamer and the dreamed appear to be separate, when in fact they're one and the same. Now, what if the same principle applies to your waking life? What if the you that experiences this moment is also, at a deeper level, the creator of this moment? What if consciousness itself is playing this divine game of hide and seek, creating worlds and then experiencing them as if they exist independently? The Hindu tradition calls this Maya, the great cosmic illusion where the ultimate reality, which they call Brahman, pretends to be all the separate things and beings of the world. It's rather like an actor who becomes so absorbed in a role that he temporarily forgets he's acting. Consider this possibility, that the deepest nature of your consciousness, what you really are beneath all the layers of identity and personalities, not merely a witness to reality, but the very source from which reality springs. And perhaps this waking life is not fundamentally different from the dream state, but simply another level of dream-inja collective dream we're all participating in together. If this seems strange or impossible, ask yourself, is it any more miraculous than the fact that each night you create entire worlds in your sleep? Worlds with their own physics, their own dramas, their own cast of characters. The capacity for world creation is clearly within you. Perhaps it extends further than you realize. What if, and this is a delightful what if the entire cosmos, this whole magnificent show, is fundamentally playful in nature? Not serious, not purposeful in the grim, determined way we often imagine, but playful like a dance, like music, like laughter. You see, in the West, we've inherited this rather solemn view of existence. God is terribly serious. Life is terribly serious.
The more you talk, the more you lose. You think silence is weakness? You're wrong. You believe success comes from stating your goals, sharing your journey, inspiring others to support you? Machiavelli would call that a fatal mistake. The more you speak, the more weapons you give away. The more you talk, the more you lose. Because in the game of power, every word is evidence against yourself. Have you ever wondered, why do people fail, even when they're hardworking, goal-oriented, and passionate? It's not because they lack skill. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they speak too soon. They share too much. They open their mouth before there's anything to prove. You say you're learning. You say you're changing. You say you're building something. But in that very moment, you erase your ability to surprise. Others start watching you, doubting you, and controlling you. They don't need to sabotage you. They just need to say one sentence at the right time. Oh, another dreamer. So, you're doing something big now? Cool, let's see if you actually do it. And the moment you react, the game ends. In The Prince, Machiavelli doesn't just teach you how to hold power. He teaches you how to hold secrecy. Secrecy of plans. Secrecy of motives. Secrecy of your real self. Because power doesn't come from making declarations. It comes from no one knowing what you're preparing. The prince who says nothing rules everything. The true ruler is the one who doesn't need to speak. In this video, you'll discover why the more you share, the easier you are to manipulate. Why silence isn't withdrawal, but a strategic strike. Why the most powerful people are the hardest to read. And how to build silence into a weapon of psychological warfare. If you're tired of constantly having to explain your effort, if you've been disappointed by encouragement turning into doubt, and if you've started many things but never finished, then this video is your wake-up call. Not to stop trying, but to stop performing. Stop telling the world what you're doing, and start doing it. Silence is the death of speculation, and speculation is what makes enemies nervous. And now, let's dive into Machiavelli's first cold strategy. Never let them guess you. We begin. Reaction is evidence. Silence is command. Are you this kind of person? Someone calls you arrogant, and you immediately react. No, I'm just trying my best. That's not what I meant. You misunderstood me. You're not arguing. You're not angry. You're just explaining. Polite, sincere. And right there, you've lost. Machiavelli doesn't care if you're right or wrong. He only cares about who controls the other person's mind. The faster you react, the more you reveal. The more you explain, the weaker you become. No status. No power. All it takes is to trigger your emotional reflex, and they can move you like a puppet. The first instinct of human beings is the need to be understood. You want people to see that you're good. You want them to know your intentions are pure. You want them not to misunderstand you. But Machiavelli is different. He doesn't need to be understood. He only needs to be respected. And to be respected, sometimes, you must accept being misunderstood. Imagine this all too familiar scenario. You tell someone you're working on something. They act supportive. Then add a harmless little sentence like, "Sounds cool, but it's competitive. Just don't quit halfway like last time." Okay, let's see if you actually stick to it. And you, with all your energy stored up for action, suddenly shift into defense mode. You start talking more, clarifying more, promising more. And just like that, they didn't need to stop you. They just had to plant doubt. That's the fatal weakness of 90% of modern people. They can't handle being unrecognized. They can't live without being believed in. And so, they become easier to manipulate than ever. You want to do something great? Then the question isn't, do people support me? But, can I keep moving, even while they laugh in my face? You'll meet people like this. 1. The one who encourages you, then calls you naive behind your back. 2. The one who asks questions just to gather information. 3. The one who pretends to support, but secretly waits for you to fail so they can say, "I told you so." Not because they're evil, but because people have a reflex to respond to your growth with suspicion. That's why Machiavelli always separates intention from expression. Are you writing a book? Don't tell. Are you transforming your body? Don't post. Are you rebuilding your life? Let others find out when it's too late for them to interfere. Silence isn't just a tactic. It's a cloak that makes you invisible to the enemy. If they don't know where you're going, they can't block you. If they're not sure what you're doing, they can't manipulate you. A wise man once said, "The less you share, the less they can use against you." That may sound pessimistic, but in Machiavellian strategy, it's a foundational truth. Not everyone who listens wants you to succeed. Not all advice is harmless, and not all concern is sincere. How many times have you fallen for this trap? You share your plan to learn a new skill. Someone says, "Oh, that's hard." You start to doubt. You quit. You weren't banned. You weren't attacked. You were defeated by advice. Machiavelli taught, kind words can be the sweetest knife. Leaders don't need advice. They need outcomes. So stop seeking approval. Stop seeking agreement. Go without applause. There are two types of people in this world. 1. Those who live for validation. 2. Those who live to complete the mission. The first gets recognition, likes, shares, but disappear in the crowd. The second get forgotten in the process, but then become what no one expected. Can you do that? Not say you're learning. Not say you're trying. Not say you're changing. Just act. Alone. No response. No witnesses. You can go far if you don't need to be seen. Don't react when they doubt you. Don't react when they mock you. Don't react when they pretend to support you. Just continue. Quietly. Without explanation. Don't let outside voices change your internal direction. Because the truly dangerous man isn't the loud one. It's the one who doesn't react and still moves forward. You're learning to fight back with knowledge? Stay silent. You're quietly building a new life? Stay silent. You're waiting to reappear as a completely different version of yourself? Stay silent, and you'll see. They unravel. They overstep. They collapse. Just because they can't figure out what's happening inside your mind. So what's the next move? When you've stopped reacting, when you've mastered the silence under every gaze, now it's time to turn silence into a strategy. Not just to hide, but to strike. Not to retreat, but to control. That's where we move into the next chapter, cold strategy, the silent tactic that makes others reveal themselves before you even have to act. You've been told to be honest, to be transparent, to show your intentions. But here's the strategy Machiavelli knew before anyone else did. Let them talk. Let them show their hand. And while they do, say nothing. That silence, it isn't passivity. It's pressure. You're not ignoring them. You're watching. And when the time comes, you'll strike with full control. Power doesn't begin when you react. It begins when you don't need to. They insult you? You pause. They challenge you? You say less. Because silence isn't the absence of response. It's a deliberate response they can't read. And people fear what they can't read. The more they try to provoke you, the more confused they get. The more they talk, the more they expose. You, on the other hand, stay quiet. Because the one who speaks first often reveals the most. When you remain silent, they begin speaking for you. They guess your intentions. They invent your motives. They reveal their fears. And that is leverage. A man who needs to explain has already surrendered the battlefield. A man who says little controls the entire terrain. Let them underestimate you. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them think you're weak. Because power is not about how loud you are. It's about how unshakable you remain when provoked. Machiavelli understood this. He didn't chase approval. He didn't announce his plays. He sat back and let others reveal themselves first. Why? Because when your strategy is invisible, no one can defend against it. When you let others talk, they tell you their fears, their insecurities, their triggers. And now, you don't need to attack. You just need to place pressure right where it hurts. That's strategy. That's silence with teeth. In politics, silence is confusion. In negotiation, silence is power. In love, silence is control. In war, silence is a trap. Most people are addicted to being seen. They want to be praised. They want to be validated. So they talk, and talk, and talk. And in doing so, they offer themselves up as prey. But not you. You've learned the power of holding back. You've learned that saying nothing is the most strategic move on the board. They expect you to react. You don't. They expect a defense. You stay silent. Suddenly, they doubt their own words. Suddenly, they feel foolish. Suddenly, they look weak. All you did was not respond. That's how you win. The world is filled with people broadcasting their every move. They reveal their plans, their schedules, their thoughts, and then wonder why they lose, why they get sabotaged, why their momentum collapses. Because they gave the enemy everything before they made the first move. So what's the cold strategy? Don't declare. Don't promise. Don't defend. Just move. Let the result hit like thunder. Let your silence grow like a storm they didn't see coming. You don't owe the world an explanation. You don't need to respond to every challenge. You don't need to prove your strength. You need to withhold it until it's too late for them to respond. That's how power works. Don't tell them who you are. Make them wonder. Make them watch. Make them obsess. Because people don't fear the known. They fear the unpredictable. Let them guess. Let them invent rumors. Let them talk themselves into confusion. You just keep building. Keep working. Keep sharpening your blade in silence. This isn't about avoiding conflict. This is about mastering the battlefield before the war even starts. And that mastery begins in your silence. Because silence isn't a weakness. It's a test. And most people fail that test. They fill the silence with noise, with panic, with emotion, with reaction. But not you. You let the silence grow. You let them speak. And then, when the moment is right, you move. One action. No warning. No defense. That's the cold strategy. People respect what they don't understand. They follow what they can't control. They fear what doesn't flinch. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to correct lies. You don't need to fix your reputation. You just need to keep moving. Without noise. Without permission. Without fear. That's how kings rise. That's how empires are built. That's how legends are born. Not through speeches, but through unshakable silence, followed by undeniable execution. They'll ask you later, how did you do it? And you'll smile, because they weren't supposed to know. They were supposed to find out, when it was already done. That's the game Machiavelli played. And that's the game you're learning now. Ready for the next step? Because once you understand this strategy, you'll begin to see just how predictable others really are, and how you can turn their every move against them. Most people don't lose because they're weak. They lose because they're predictable. You've seen this happen over and over. Someone announces a new goal. They're excited. They post about it. They tell everyone. Week 1, full of energy. Week 2, minor setbacks. Week 3, silence. Week 4, it's over. And the worst part? They don't even realize it. They think they lost motivation. But the truth is, they lost control the moment they made their plan public. It's a pattern, and patterns are easy to break, easy to exploit, easy to destroy. People crave validation more than they crave progress. They want to be seen trying, more than they want to finish. So they speak, they over-explain, they ask for opinions, they invite sabotage. And when things collapse, they don't understand why, because they never learned to build in silence, to suffer in silence, to win in silence. Here's the brutal pattern. Step 1, excitement. Step 2, announcement. Step 3, external feedback. Step 4, emotional interference. Step 5, collapse. It happens in business, in relationships, in transformation, in art, in every field of life. They start strong, but they start loud. And loud beginnings always lead to quiet endings. You can't be loud and unpredictable. You can't be loud and strategic. You can't be loud and Machiavellian. Because the moment they hear your voice, they start mapping your next move. Humans don't need proof to doubt you. They just need noise. And once you've made enough of it, they'll use your own words to kill your momentum. They'll say, "I thought you were going to do this. Didn't you say you were changing? Weren't you working on something?" And every one of those sentences is a knife disguised as a reminder. People don't always want you to fail, but they feel safer when you do. Because your success makes their excuses harder to believe. So, the moment you rise above average, they look for something to pull you back. And if you're loud, you make it easy for them. They don't even need to stop you. They just need to mirror back your words. And let your own mind do the damage. This is the human pattern. Most people can't handle internal pressure without external approval. So, they self-destruct. Quietly. Elegantly. Repeatedly. You've seen this. You've lived this. Maybe you're still doing this. It's not a moral flaw. It's a structural flaw. One that can be reversed. With awareness. You must learn the art of non-disclosure. You must learn to act without broadcast. You must learn to endure without applause. Because the applause you hear today becomes the expectation that crushes you tomorrow. Here's how it happens. You say, "I'm changing." They say, "That's great." You say, "I'm starting this new path." They say, "Good luck." And inside that good luck lies every reason for you to second-guess yourself. The moment it gets hard, because now you're not changing for you. You're performing. And performers always burn out when the stage goes dark. But Machiavellians don't need an audience. They need an outcome. And to get that outcome, they accept being invisible. Can you? Can you do great work? With no likes, no comments, no support? Can you disappear for months? And come back with results that silence every doubter? Because if you can't, you're not ready for power. You're not ready for silence. You're not ready for war. You're still addicted to noise. Here's another pattern. Most people seek accountability because they don't trust themselves. So they announce their goals to create pressure. But Machiavelli didn't need pressure. He created tension in others. He didn't say, "Watch me work." He made people say, "What is he up to?" He didn't post progress. He disappeared. He reappeared with dominance. He made absence feel like a statement. He made silence feel like a threat. That's the pattern you must reverse. Don't seek pressure from others. Build pressure in yourself. And when that internal pressure burns hot enough, you won't need anyone to hold you accountable. You'll hold yourself like a king protects his crown. Quiet, unforgiving, focused. You think you're not motivated? No. You've just been poisoned by the need to be seen. Because when you detach from being seen, you'll see everything. Their games, their traps, their fears. Because while they're still busy posting progress, you're already gone. The pattern is simple. People chase attention. Machiavellians chase position. People want to be noticed. Machiavellians want to be undeniable. And to become undeniable, you must disappear long enough to become unrecognizable. But that's hard, because people are addicted to being understood. You've been trained to believe that being misunderstood is a threat, that if people don't get you, you've failed. That's a lie. If they fully understand you, they can fully control you. So make peace with being misunderstood. In fact, seek it. Let them question you. Let them misread you. Let them write your story wrong. You're not here to correct them. You're here to surpass them. That's what makes you different. That's what separates kings from pawns. The pawn plays to be recognized. The king plays to be remembered. One gets attention. The other gets history. You get to choose. And if you choose power, you must break the pattern. No more announcing. No more explaining. No more showing your hand. You're not here to impress. You're here to dominate. And domination begins where noise ends. So ask yourself this. Can you go 100 days in complete silence? Building something that speaks for you? No proof. No praise. Just preparation. If you can do that, you've broken the pattern. If you can't, you're still playing their game. But here's the final truth. You don't need permission to vanish. You don't need approval to transform. You don't need applause to be legendary. You just need to start and say nothing. Because by the time they notice, it'll be too late. And that's the point. Now, if you've seen this pattern in others and in yourself, you already know what must come next. You've seen the danger of being readable. You've seen the trap of being known. Now it's time to learn how to flip the entire game. Not by reacting, not by defending, but by turning their attacks into your weapons, their words into your fuel, their accusations into your proof. Let's move into the next phase. Inversion move. The psychological counterstrike. Machiavelli used to humiliate enemies without saying a word. They think they've cornered you. They think they've exposed you. They think they've won. But they forgot one thing. The more they speak, the more they sink. Because, in the mind of a Machiavellian, every attack is fuel. Every doubt is leverage. Every insult is a gift. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire by making them burn themselves. That's the inversion move. The art of flipping pressure back onto the source. Without resistance. Without defense. Without breaking character. It begins with a principle. Never resist directly. Redirect silently. Let them speak. Let them accuse. Let them believe they've shaken you. And then, change nothing. Say nothing. Do nothing. Because when they don't get the reaction they expect, they panic. They double down. They unravel. People attack you to feel in control. But when you don't respond, they lose that control. They begin to question themselves. They feel unstable. They reveal more than they intended. That's the trap. Not the words. Not the noise. But the mirror. You show them. Themselves. When they call you arrogant, you stay quiet. Now they wonder, did I project something? Am I the one who's insecure? When they call you cold, you stay still. Now they ask, why does this bother me so much? What wound did I just touch? You flipped it, without saying a word. Because the most effective retaliation doesn't feel like retaliation. It feels like reflection. And people can't handle their own reflection. They want you to defend. They want you to fight. They want you to lower yourself. You don't. You rise by remaining still. The inversion move isn't passive. It's predatory. You wait. You study. You collect information. And when the time is right, you strike. Not emotionally. Not loudly. Strategically. Coldly. Precisely. The one who speaks first loses structure. The one who reacts first reveals weakness. The one who explains first gives away control. So don't speak. Don't react. Don't explain. Invert. Make them explain. Make them doubt. Make them chase their own story. That's power. You're not trying to win arguments. You're trying to control outcomes. That's a different game. A higher game. And only few can play it. Everyone else is busy chasing justice. You're busy collecting leverage. Everyone else is busy being understood. You're busy becoming unreadable. And because you're unreadable, you're untouchable. Inversion isn't just a tactic. It's a way of existing. Where others seek comfort, you create tension. Where others seek praise, you provoke silence. Where others seek forgiveness, you let guilt grow, until it becomes their prison. You've seen it. Someone hurts you. You say nothing. Days pass. Weeks. They start asking questions. They start explaining themselves without being asked. They start unraveling. That's the inversion. You took the attack and turned it into their collapse. No confrontation. No negotiation. Just silence. Just pressure. Just gravity. The more they try to fix it, the deeper they sink. This isn't cruelty. This is design. Because you're not here to play equal. You're here to control the entire board. And control begins with not reacting. The strongest players don't respond. They absorb. They flip. They end the game. On their terms. You have to train for this. Most people can't handle silence. They get itchy. They get insecure. They feel they must clarify. That's the trap. You clarify, you collapse. Because once you explain, you legitimize the accusation. Let them accuse. Let them whisper. Let them invent. And while they build stories, you build position. That's Machiavelli. He didn't fear being misunderstood. He used misunderstanding to isolate, to dominate, to eliminate. You're not defending. You're dissolving their attack. From the inside. With silence. With confidence. With time. Time is your co-conspirator. The longer you wait, the more power shifts in your favor. Because time unmasks insecurity. Time reveals motive. Time exposes fear. They lash out. You wait. They provoke. You wait. They stumble. You strike. This isn't theory. It's how real dominance works. The loudest people break first. The most reactive minds lose first. The most emotionally driven players are the first to be removed from the game. But you stay. You stand. You smile. And you flip everything they send at you. Right back at them. Inversion isn't defense. It's domination in disguise. You don't just survive an attack. You reverse it. You bend it. You make it work for you. They say you can't do it? Good. Let their doubt become your data. They mock you? Perfect. Use their words to fuel silence so powerful. They can't speak around you anymore. They betray you? Excellent. Make that betrayal the very reason you rise beyond them. This is not revenge. It's transformation. Machiavelli once wrote, "Injuries must be dealt all at once, but favors, little by little." Apply the same logic. When you are hurt, disappear. And when you return, don't announce it. Just be 10 steps ahead. That's how you punish betrayal. Not with confrontation, but with success they can't deny, and distance they can't reach. That's how you punish disrespect. Not with words, but by never being accessible again. And that's how you win every game. Not by playing harder, but by changing the rules while they're still reading the instructions. Inversion is not about ego. It's about control. They show emotion. You remain cold. They confess weakness. You show none. They react. You observe. And because of that, they lose balance. They lose pace. They lose sight of their original goal. And now, they're playing your game. That's the final goal of inversion. Not just to flip a moment, but to flip their entire strategy. So from now on, every time someone attacks, accuses, provokes, or doubts you, don't explain. Don't fight. Invert. Pause. Breathe. Watch them collapse under the weight of their own fire. Now you understand the counterattack. But Machiavelli didn't stop there. The next phase is even more brutal, because it requires you to step back and say nothing. Not just for strategy, but for power itself. You've used silence to survive. Now it's time to use silence to build an aura, a presence, a mystery, a reputation they can't control. Let's enter the next stage, the aura of silence, where power begins without a single word, presence without noise, influence without effort. You walk into a room, you say nothing, and yet every head turns. Not because of what you've done, not because of what you wear, but because of what you don't reveal. That's the aura of silence. The invisible force people can't describe, but can't ignore. It's not charisma. It's not charm. It's power distilled into stillness. Most people announce themselves with noise. They enter loudly. They speak quickly. They prove too much. And that's why they're forgotten. But you're different. You don't enter to be seen. You enter to observe, to absorb, to unnerve. Because when people can't read you, they can't control you. And when they can't control you, they respect you. The aura of silence isn't about being mysterious for attention. It's about becoming unreadable by design. Not shy, not passive, strategically unreadable. They don't know what you think. They don't know what you want. They don't know if you're angry, calm, or ready to strike. And that uncertainty becomes your weapon. When you speak less, every word hits harder. When you move less, every action carries weight. They feel it. Even if they can't explain it, It's the same energy that ancient kings carried. The kind that made people bow before they even spoke. Machiavelli understood this well. He wrote that a ruler must know when to disappear and when to reappear with force, because absence builds demand. Silence builds suspense. Most people chase attention. You control it. Most people speak to fill space. You let space speak for you. When everyone is loud, the quietest person becomes the most powerful. They try to read your silence. They project onto it. They imagine what you must be thinking. But the truth is, you gave them nothing. And now, they have to deal with themselves. That's the game. The less you show, the more they reveal. The less you explain, the more they confess. And in their attempt to understand you, they expose their own insecurities. That's the aura. Not of dominance, but of control. You control the narrative by not participating in it. You control perception by refusing to perform. You control attention by withdrawing it. When you learn to sit in silence, without fidgeting, without needing to fill the gap, without breaking, you become the gravity in the room. People orbit around you. They adjust their tone. They soften their criticism. They seek your approval without knowing why. Because your silence isn't absence. It's presence magnified. Most people speak because they're uncomfortable. You remain quiet because you're in command. You don't chase energy. You absorb it. You direct it. Your silence is not awkward. It's orchestrated. And those who don't understand it, they fear it. Because in a world where everyone is broadcasting, you're the only one who refuses to be predictable. And that makes you dangerous. They think they need to know what you think. But they don't. They only need to feel it. And they do. In the pause before your words. In the stillness behind your stare. In the restraint behind your smile. It shakes them. Because most people have never met someone who doesn't need to prove anything. You don't prove. You position. You don't argue. You allow. You don't perform. You possess. Possess stillness. Possess time. Possess space. And in doing so, you begin to shift the hierarchy without lifting a finger. Watch what happens when you walk into a room and say nothing. The most insecure begin to talk more. The most dominant try to test you. The most observant try to align with you. Because your silence demands interpretation. And that interpretation is always louder than anything you could have said. Now they wonder, who are you? What do you want? What are you planning? You don't answer. You simply let the question live in their mind. Because the most powerful influence is the one they give you freely. You didn't ask for it. You didn't chase it. You just remained. And that's when silence becomes identity. Not just a tactic, but a way of being. You no longer react. You absorb. You no longer seek. You attract. You no longer prove. You exist. And your existence becomes a challenge to theirs. That's why some people will hate you. Without reason. Without cause. Because your silence exposes the noise inside them. They need validation. You don't. They need affirmation. You don't. They need to be seen. You're fine being invisible. And that drives them insane. The aura of silence is not always loved, but it is always respected. Because when you don't speak, they have nothing to attack. When you don't move, they have nothing to counter. When you don't explain, they have nothing to dismantle. You are simply there. And that there is more powerful than any speech, any argument, any defense. Because the truly powerful don't speak first. They make others speak and reveal everything. That's the aura you must build. Not overnight, but with patience, with discipline, with withdrawal. The less accessible you are, the more valuable you become. The less predictable you are, the more feared you become. The less reactive you are, the more control you have. Not over others, but over reality itself. Because when your presence doesn't need volume, it bends time. It shifts power. It breaks patterns. You don't lead with words. You lead with gravity. You don't rise by announcement. You rise by absence. And you don't disappear as escape. You disappear as a move. The aura of silence is not retreat. It's positioning. You step back. Not because you're lost, but because you're calculating the entire battlefield. And when you return, it's never with noise. It's with consequence. A new form. A new power. A new identity. And they will not be ready. Because they never saw the work. They only saw the result. They'll say, "Where have you been?" And you'll say nothing. Because the silence was the answer all along. Now that you've mastered the aura, it's time to learn how to turn silence into obsession. Because when you disappear correctly, people don't forget you. They search for you. And in that search, you gain what noise could never buy. Control over their attention. Control over their emotion. Control over their imagination. Let's move into the next level. Viral loop point. Where silence doesn't just protect you. It spreads you. You disappeared. And now they can't stop thinking about you. That's the point. You didn't announce your exit. You didn't explain. You didn't say goodbye. You just left. Silently. Cleanly. And silence spread. Not just in their ears, but in their mind. Because in a world addicted to updates, the one who says nothing becomes the loudest memory. You became a question. A mystery. A mental loop. They thought they'd moved on. But you kept echoing. In their habits. In their conversations. In their doubts. That's viral power. Not the kind you chase. The kind you install, then walk away. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He didn't try to be loved. He designed his absence to haunt the minds of those who misunderstood him. Because when people can't understand you, they start trying to solve you. And when they try to solve you, they think of you more than they ever did when you were present. That's the loop. You're not there, but they're still with you. They replay your words. They analyze your tone. They try to reverse engineer your silence. And in doing so, they feed the very image they tried to ignore. You are no longer a person. You've become a presence, a disturbance in their rhythm, a shadow behind their smile, a whisper in their moments of doubt. They open their phone, hoping you posted. They scan their messages, looking for your name. They think about reaching out, but they don't. Because deep down, they know what you've become. Untouchable, unreachable, unforgettable. This isn't manipulation. This is consequence. You didn't force them to miss you. You removed yourself, and their mind did the rest. Because when someone is truly powerful, their silence does more damage than another person's full attention. You didn't leave a gap. You left a gravity. They orbit you now, without knowing it. That's the viral loop. It's not about going viral online. It's about going viral in people's psychology. You didn't need a platform. You became the platform. The space their thoughts bounce off. The filter their decisions pass through. Because once someone feels the weight of your absence, they're no longer in control of their own memory. You are. Every time they laugh. There's a flicker of you. Every time they fail. There's a memory of what you warned. Every time they lie to themselves. There's your silence. Screaming. Because you said nothing. But everything is still being said about you. They don't move on. They loop back. They revisit your last words. They search for new meanings. They invent new reasons for why you vanished. And all the while, you've said nothing. You've done nothing. Because the power wasn't in your action. It was in your removal. People expect explosions. You gave them absence. And absence, done correctly, is the most explosive force in the psychological game. You don't have to be impressive. You just have to be missing. Because the mind hates unfinished stories. And when you walk away with no closure, they invent one. They create endings. They make you bigger than you were. That's not ego. That's engineering. You didn't grow in presence. You grew in meaning. They replay every interaction. They ask what they missed. They wonder if it was their fault. They wonder if they ever really knew you. They didn't. Because you designed it that way. You didn't want to be understood. You wanted to be studied. And the more they study you, the more they forget themselves. That's the virus. You infect their routine. You bend their memories. You hijack their thoughts. And while they obsess, you evolve. You don't loop back. You don't reappear. You let the myth spread, while you build something even more silent, more dangerous, more permanent. Because while they're talking about who you were, you're already becoming someone else. And the next time they hear of you, it won't be through your own voice. It will be through reputation. Someone else says your name. Someone else references your presence. Someone else tells the story. Now, the virus spreads without you. Your name enters rooms you've never walked into. Your face lingers in people who've never met you. Your silence travels further than your words ever could. That's legacy. Not built through attention, but through tension. You created the tension. You walked away. You left it to expand. And now, it grows. People remember how you made them feel. But silence? Silence multiplies that feeling. They feel it in the gaps, in the pauses, in the empty space where you used to be. You're not forgotten. You're recurring. You're the lesson they keep learning. You're the chapter they can't close. You're the line they quote, even if they pretend they don't remember it came from you. You're not chasing attention. You've become the standard. They compare everyone else to. That's how you go viral without noise. That's how you become unforgettable, without trying to be remembered. Because you don't need reminders. You are the reminder. That's the loop. They return, even if they never reach out. They observe, even if they pretend not to look. They wait, even if they act like they've moved on. And you stay still, because stillness is your signal, and they've tuned into it, without consent. That's how you flip the system. Everyone else shouts. You vanish. Everyone else begs. You erase. Everyone else builds urgency. You build absence. And that absence becomes obsession. You don't